Well, good afternoon, everyone. We are so excited for you to be joining us today for our 17th Growth Hour webinar from Shed Advisor about all things sheds. My name is Rebecca Bradley Ray, and I will be your moderator for today. So if you have any comments or questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to enter them in the chat box at any time. We're going to have a Q&A section at the end of the webinar. So for those of you on the phone, you can just unmute and ask us directly at that time. So let me introduce our host today. Steve Byler is a certified speaker and coach with Maxwell Leadership and a certified EOS implementer who assists leaders and leadership teams in getting clear with their vision in order to get more out of what they really want from their business. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you, Rebecca. And it's good to be with all of you folks here this afternoon on this lovely spring day here in the Shenandoah Valley. And hopefully it's beautiful where you are as well. So this webinar, you're stuck with yours truly. We don't have any guests today, though I'm excited to tell you that next month we do have a guest planned, and I'm excited to invite Sherry Bender, who is a fractional HR person, to give us some input on hiring, people challenges, and those sorts of things. But today we're just focused in on kind of what's been my world much of my life, and that is all things sheds. I was 6 years old when my dad started a shed company here in Virginia, been in sheds ever since. And we've titled this webinar simply All Things Sheds, Running a Healthy Shed Business. Now, I want to note that as we start here, I've been in all facets of the business, really have lived in what I call a vertically integrated shed company, where we had our own retail stores, ran our own marketing, we had our own manufacturing, delivery and install business, had our own rent-to-own company, did our own finance in-house. So literally pretty much everything related to the shed business, we had in a group of companies. And I'm still an owner in that sort of platform, though I'm not involved day to day anymore, working as an EOS implementer and coach with a number of shed companies and also businesses from quite a number of other industries. So I do get to see kind of the inside view of shed companies across the country in the companies that I work with. And as many of you know, in the shed industry, there are quite a number of different business models in the shed world. There's no right business model or wrong business model. There are just different models. If you go with the kind of model that I grew up in, so the completely vertically integrated, where we literally control every aspect of the process, as that business grows, it actually gets pretty complex. There are a lot of moving parts. I think many attempts at the industry to simplify have been to take one aspect of that business and focus on it. So we have folks just focused on retail. They might just have a retail shed lot. They may work on commission. They may buy wholesale and retail, and then they subcontract out deliveries. There are companies that are primarily manufacturers. There are companies that are primarily in the rent-to-own or finance space. So there are different niches, but I want to note that whatever the level of complexity in that business that you're involved in, it has all of these major aspects. So just acknowledge that a fully vertically integrated shed company is quite complex. There's a blend of retail, marketing, kind of manufacturing, logistics, construction, and all the traditional stuff around hiring people, managing people, and keeping good financials. But inside of that, every shed business has three major functions. And I'm going to flip here to my little whiteboard. When I'm in my coaching zone, I'll be honest with you, I spend a lot of my life on whiteboards. And these whiteboards have become a second home to me. Now, let me just qualify. That doesn't mean you get to expect really high quality drawings and graphics and writing here today, because it just gets a little messy. That's kind of how we are. But the complexity of the shed business really has these three major functions. And we're going to unpack that here today. And then we're going to describe a bit what healthy looks like in each of those three functions, what some common challenges are, what leaders need to focus on in those major functions, and finally, a takeaway in each of those major functions. So I'm just going to kind of open up my fire hose here, lay some of this out. and look forward to your interaction, questions, comments as we move through the webinar, particularly toward the end of our time together. So I would like to start just by noting that most businesses don't struggle because they lack effort. Entrepreneurs who start businesses work really hard. And we often get into the mindset that when we have a problem, the way we solve the problem is we work harder, we work longer. So the big idea here today is most businesses don't struggle because they lack effort. People are bringing their effort to the game. They struggle rather because their core functions aren't aligned. And if your core functions aren't aligned, you tend to have more chaos inside the organization and fail to reach those objectives. So let's just identify these three core functions that every shed business has. And we're going to start just by putting them in boxes. And these three boxes are left to right, and it's kind of almost in the order of the way we do business. The first one we have is marketing and sales. Okay, and if you are in a retail business, this is where the majority of your activities occur. If you're in a manufacturing business, whether you manufacture and sell through a dealer network or manufacture and sell to wholesalers, that doesn't mean you don't do sales and marketing. You do. You're selling your products, pardon me, somewhere. It just may not be the primary focus of your business. Okay, the next primary function, we might call it production. And in the shed industry, it really has to do with manufacturing and install. And then finally, finance and admin. Okay, these are the three major functions inside every shed business. And again, some focus on just production, some focus just on marketing, finance. And there's a sense in which some do focus on the finance side through rent-own or finance platforms. Now, we're going to summarize these three functions in this way. So the marketing and sales function, we're simply going to summarize as this is the place where you get the business. And remember that really in a business, nothing happens till somebody sells something. So getting business is actually really, really critical, really, really important to running a successful business. In the production side, then, this is the focus here in this aspect of business is delivering the product. And for many shed companies, this involves the manufacturing of that product and a secondary install, whether it's taking components out, building on site, shipping packages, or actually delivering a completed product. So first of all, we have to get the business. We have to get people who want our product. And then we produce and ship that product. And then finally, the finance and admin function is about tracking and measuring success. And I would note, we all hope it's success. Sometimes it's errors, mistakes, problems, but the goal here is to do these two previous functions in a way that generates profitability, great results. So every issue in the business typically traces back to one of these areas. It's either a problem in marketing and sales, it's a problem in our production, kind of delivering the product, or a problem in our tracking and measuring our success. And strength in one will not compensate for weaknesses in the other aspect. So we really do have to focus on being strong in each of these areas. So let's break down what healthy looks like in each area, and then some of the challenges in my work with shed companies, and even the shed companies I'm involved in, what some of those challenges are here in 2026. So starting with sales and marketing, I would summarize the primary focus here and what healthy really looks like is owning the lead to the close. And leads simply show up in so many different ways. Back in the old days when we started, almost all the leads we got were customers driving into our business. They showed up at the store, they showed up at our shop. Our store and shop was one place back then, and they drove back up this country road, pulled down into the front of our shop and got out. And the guys in the shop would look at each other and say, "Who's going to talk to this customer?" And one of us would, quickly grab the air hose and blow the sawdust off and go talk to the customer. And there was usually kind of a pecking order. If this guy's available, he's the first one. If not, then this one. And to be honest, I was 6 years old, sold my first shed, which means nobody else was around. I was the only person to represent the business. And so I took the order from a customer who drove in, sold my first shed. Let me tell you, it's a lot harder now to sell sheds probably than it was, pardon me, when I was 6 years old. Oh, I'm sorry, I got a little tickle in my throat here. But healthy looks like owning, as soon as a lead shows up that we have, really taking full ownership of that and leadership all the way to a close or potentially rejection. And there are three words I want us to think about here just for just a moment. And these three words I want to note as a little bit of a history lesson in the development of the world of sheds. Back when we started building sheds, it was a product business. Nobody else in our community, nobody else in the state was building quality wood sheds that could actually be delivered, installed in the backyard, that were constructed like somebody's house. They came all backyard sheds pretty much, either built by a contractor or they came in these flat packages of metal that took, 6 busted knuckles and 2 weekends and 1,000 screws, washers, and nuts to put together on the weekend. And then the first time a big storm came through, it could roll over and end up in the neighbor's backyard. That was sheds back in the day. So this was a new product. And when this product was available, wherever it was available, it attracted attention. And so people came for the product. And the product just kind of was what the product was. And the product tended to sell itself. So, I remember our launch in the business space. What really started driving customers to our location, kind of back out in the country road, was the local newspaper for our local town insert came out and did an interview, said, "You're doing something different out here. What is it?" And my dad told the story. We're building sheds. We're building them out of, actually 2x4s with shingles on the roof and sided exteriors. They're not just metal. They don't sweat, all this sort of thing. And this was actually a story, made it to the front page of our local newspaper with photos of these sheds. And the traffic started flowing. And that's how we got our leads. The product itself was kind of the attraction. Compared to today, in the county where I grew up, I think there are at least now 25 places just in that county where sheds like this can be purchased. They're sitting on lots for sale. And it's very possible the number's even higher than 25. And the average of these lots have at least 25 sheds sitting on them. So there are literally hundreds of options now in the same county for people to get the product. And you could go from one shed lot to another shed lot, and there are minor differences. Everybody says, "Oh, look at our quality." The truth of the matter is the quality difference now between most shed companies is minimal. There are minor distinctions. There are minor design changes. There are minor differences. And the product itself usually doesn't stand out without significant education. So the product now is broadly available. This is one of the reasons many shed companies are facing challenges. They're still in a product mindset. If I build a quality product and I put it out beside the road, people are going to stop by and buy the stuff. Okay, that era is kind of gone. The next piece that shows up here, and 3 Ps. Okay, I'm really proud of myself for having come up with these three Ps. The second one, and this was a conversation then for many years. And I find that a lot of shed companies are still having this conversation. Oh, price. We have the best price. We're the cheapest. We're the Walmart of the shed world. Okay, you may or may not be the best price. At the end of the day, it's not the biggest deal anymore. People don't care so much about the exact price. Now, I'm saying there are always the few, tire kickers who it's all about price. And for those people, you can hardly be cheap enough. In fact, as I had a friend tell me, if I need a dry spot, what he just told me, he said a shed is really just a dry spot in the backyard. And he said, you want to charge me $5,000 for a 10-foot by 12-foot dry spot in the backyard? I can go and buy a tarp at the local hardware store for $12 and get a 10 by 12 dry spot in my backyard. So I said, hey, help yourself. Okay, go ahead and buy your blue tarp and keep your lawnmower under it. That's fine. You're just not one of my clients. So price really becomes this really kind of funny thing. We get all sensitive and worried about our price point. And product and price were kind of the bare bones of the industry. And unfortunately, many companies and many salespeople are still kind of stuck in that product price mindset around all of the marketing and sales. Getting the business. How we get business? We build a great product, have a great price. And if we can build the best product and have the lowest price, oh, we're going to win. Okay, it's not working. It worked for a while in the past. It's not working now. The third P, and they actually all begin with PR. Okay, so I'm really on a roll here now. The third P that really is our current point of attention is our process. Okay, process is king. And so for companies that are doing well in the sales and marketing side today, the companies that are really winning, they have a consistent, predictable lead flow. That's because they have a great process around generating leads. They have a clear process from the time the inquiry shows up through the quoting process to the closing process. It's heavily process driven. And then they have a defined ownership of the lead. When a lead shows up, they're absolutely clear who owns it, and they have a strong follow-up discipline around that process. Nobody's winging and flinging it. Okay, and these are the challenges that I see showing up in shed companies who are struggling in the marketing and sales of their products. They're getting enough business. They want more business. And if their challenge is we want more business and we simply don't have enough business, often it's not a product issue and it's not a price issue. It's a process issue. And some of the challenges around these process issues are there's an inconsistent or low quality of leads. You can get junk leads. Okay, so there can be low quality leads or they're inconsistent. We don't have a steady volume of leads coming in. And leads now in our day is far more than just a car showing up at the store. It's even far more than the phone ringing and somebody asking about sheds. They come from social campaigns. They come from YouTube channels. They come from marketing campaigns that are Google AdWords. They come from SEO, search optimization for people showing up on your website, and from other media that we have out there that we use for our marketing. So whatever we do in our marketing has to generate leads, and these leads have to be trackable. We have to be able to follow up on them. We have to be clear about who owns the lead, who owns that relationship. And I'm just finding that shed companies that are struggling in the marketing and sales category usually are overly reliant on what we call passive channels. In other words, people just driving by, showing up, and coming into our lots, generating leads by walking in or just picking up the phone and calling. Okay, we have to generate through good, healthy processes. We have to generate a model and a process that actually creates leads, quality leads, and brings them in ways that we can document, we can channel, so we can understand how we can grow and scale our business. So leaders in the sales side, in the sales and marketing side for shed companies, have to have a clarity of process, a clearly documented pipeline. This is where leads are coming from. These are the ones that are best. Here's what happens when a lead shows up. Here's how we manage that lead, take ownership for the lead, immediately respond when possible, and take ownership for that entire sales quote design process all the way to close. And then we have to have clear accountability for conversion metrics. If somebody's converting 50% of leads and somebody else is converting 10% of leads, and they're coming from the same sources, the 10% lead conversion person has to be held accountable. Sometimes that means training. Sometimes it means they're just not a good fit for the job. They're not a salesperson, or sometimes they're just not following your process. And to achieve that, we have to have clear scorecards. In other words, we have to have visibility. We have to be able to see into the sales process, literally every aspect of that process, to manage the sales side. And I want to note here specifically that while this is not easy, okay, while it's not easy to achieve this, it doesn't require massive technology, though technology certainly makes it very easy nowadays to at least have the system and the process documented, have transparency and visibility into the process. But what it does require is it requires you to have that clear process and be disciplined about sharing it. Because when we don't have discipline around sharing it and holding people accountable for it, we are simply not going to achieve good results for that process. Now, Rebecca, excuse me just a second, but I think I just messed up my share. What?
Yes, I'm seeing
I'm back
your,
to my
oh, there you
PowerPoint.
go. Yep, you're
Okay.
good.
Okay. So I just want to note here that in the sales and marketing, this is just one of the areas where we have to learn to pay attention. And when we don't have, I would say the number one, we don't know our lead to close ratio. We don't have control of our growth. So I'm excited to announce here today that we're doing a second version of what we started here about 3 months ago, 4 months ago. That's a Shed Leadership peer group. And we're now enrolling group 2 for this. The first group is doing very well, great results from it. And it's led by Lauren Miller, who has years of experience leading sales teams and is also a certified coach. And you can simply go to the Shed Advisor website, and there's a place there to apply. And if you're involved in sales and are really struggling with the process side, this is a great place to go and get help with that. Uh, if you're asking the question, who do I talk to when I need to think through a tough leadership decision on the sales side? Here is a group of people that will be committed, journeying together for a year just to share their expertise. And it's not primarily a teaching place, but it's accountability, discussion. You've got people in your corner to help you. And it's a peer group setting, usually 6 to 8 shed sales leaders. They meet once a month for 2 hours, think through real decisions. It's not a training program, though you will receive lots of valuable content. And these 2 hours are spent by sharing wins, doing a deep dive into an area of the sales process, sharing challenges, helping each other succeed, and then making commitments for one concrete action every month to really drive sales leadership and accountability in your organization. And Lauren will do a great job with this. Again, feel free to reach out. It's a $400 per month investment, and really, sell one shed extra. And more likely, you're likely to sell more than one shed per month extra by really getting focused on this process. So applicants will be screened, but do reach out on the website, shedadvisor.com, and you'll see the opportunity there. And this may be right for some of you, may not be right for all of you, but I would encourage you, if you're kind of stuck in that marketing and sales space, this is one place to get some meaningful help. Okay, we'll come back to that with some additional opportunity for questions, Q&A here in a moment. Now, let me get back to my little drawing pad again. And we're going to pivot now to the second aspect of the business, shed business, and that's focused on production. No point in producing something if you don't have a way to sell it. Okay, so we've got to be good at sales and marketing. We also have to be good at production. Now, my experience in kind of traveling around the shed industry, especially in the smaller business models, which really dominates the industry, backyard or small industrial park shops. Many of these businesses were started by people who were builders. They were contractors. They knew how to build stuff. And so a lot of the industry is really strong in the production side. I mean, are very efficient in production, are very good at the quality of product that's produced. Okay, exceptions to every one of these, around, and we love to gloat on those. But normatively, production is one of the strengths, at least in the kind of the backyard shed space, the small business model, um, you know, 10, 20 million and under. We're good at production. We're good at building the things. So, what does healthy look like in production? And this is where we really need to dial up maybe our expectations or assumptions around production. Healthy looks like predictable production schedules. Okay. And if we don't have predictable sales, if we don't have good process and then control over our sales, it's really hard to manage predictable production schedules. So that becomes one of our challenges. Smooth handoffs. This is where healthy really becomes important. Every time somebody sells something, it has to be handed off now to a group of people who are building it. And the people who are building it usually are not the person who actually talked to the customer. So that handoff process from sales to production has to be very smooth. And that happens again inside production when it goes from the factory, the shop, to the person who goes to install it, to deliver that product. Those handoffs in a healthy environment are incredibly smooth. Stuff's not falling through the cracks. It's flowing beautifully. All the appropriate information is being transferred from sales to production to install. One of the ways in which we know this is that we have a very high quality in our end product with a very low need for anything to be reworked. So if production is constantly having to go out to add a window, repaint a building, because we just got something wrong, that's a sign that the handoffs aren't working well. Okay, and then strong team capability. And I would just note this often is a strength of many of these production facilities. Got good builders in place. Now, what are some of the challenges that show up? And I've noted some of them a bit, but I want to just do a deep dive on what I'm seeing challenges in these companies in their production sides that may be important for you just to think about. Now, even if you're only in the retail space, this still impacts you. Okay, it's just not as big a part of your business as a manufacturer. But some of these challenges are, and I note the first one is inventory management. So if you're a manufacturer slash retailer, you can tie up an enormous amount of capital in raw materials and finished goods. So the material that is on your factory floor or in your warehouse, it is there for the production of your products. You could get an enormous amount of cash tied up there. Or you could mismanage the inventory. And here's where it shows up in raw materials is you constantly have outages of things and you're not able to get it. So the production of one of your products, one of your sheds is held back because you're waiting for inventory to catch up. Okay, both sides of that are inventory mismanagement. Okay, and I remember in our own business model, we went from running out of things to having way too much to be sure we'd never run out of anything. And then we couldn't figure out where our cash went. Okay, it's all tied up in raw materials. And sometimes if you have a year's worth of stuff sitting in your factory that you think is enough to last for a year, that's way too much cash tied up for that product. Unless that product is going up in price, you're wasting your capital tied up in raw material inventory. So shortages can cause delays. Too much inventory is not good for cash management. Okay, the second piece that I show up in inventory is finished goods inventory. And every company kind of has their own ideal number. But if you think about inventory, a turn ratio, how much finished goods inventory do we have versus what is our retail sales? Um, I see companies that are struggling who have a one turn annually of inventory. So they may have out on dealers' lots in their own stores, they may have $1 million worth of finished goods. This is just an example. $1 million of inventory, and their annual sales is $1 million. Okay, that is incredibly heavy cash investment for that small a turn. And then on the other side, I see companies that have figured out how to limit their finished goods inventory, the sheds that are finished sitting out for sale, and they're turning 8 to 10 times a year. So they may have $1 million in inventory, but are doing $10 to $12 million a year in revenue off of that finished goods inventory. That's a much better use of capital. Okay, and so companies struggle on both sides of this. Um, what's your strategy? What's your plan? And having too much inventory, materials, and finished goods. Or again, not having enough inventory, finished goods, and raw materials. So these are areas that you have to get good at managing to be a really, really healthy, high-performing production team. The other one I noted is back in the sales, when we have these handoffs coming from sales to operations into the factory, and then on to delivery team, and finally to service, or to get that 5-star review at the end. We have to have very clear communication systems so that the order details are adequate for effective delivery of that product according to the customer's expectations. That means the factory has to be aligned and the delivery installation team has to be clearly aligned. It requires a strong communication system. And I'll just illustrate this back, when we started, my dad sold most of the sheds. He saw every shed on the factory floor as it was being built, and then he delivered most of the sheds himself. And that became a human being who was very attentive to detail, which my dad is, very attentive to detail. He became the way to ensure that what the customer wanted gets built and is delivered. And he got the message if he missed anything in the process. Well, that's not scalable. Okay, you can't get very large with that living inside one person's head. And so it means you have to find a good system, a good process to be sure that communication flows from the sales, their conversation with the client, all the way through the production, the delivery and install, so that the customer at the end, when the product is delivered and installed, is happy and their expectations are met or exceeded based on their conversation with the sales rep. We can't have those kind of communication systems break down. And then the other one I see is bottlenecks to efficient delivery. Now, I'm just going to go with a kind of normative model here for the shed business. Somebody comes in, buys a shed at my store. Typically, I'll get, a small deposit up to about a 50% deposit, and occasionally all the money down. Okay, if they pay for the shed fully up front, this issue doesn't apply. But if you're getting a partial deposit and you can only invoice that, and this is an accounting issue, but you should not invoice it till the day that product gets shipped. It's not revenue. You're holding somebody's money. You've borrowed it from them until you've delivered the product. So you shouldn't invoice it until delivery. Well, when you're holding that money and you build the shed, and then the shed sits at your lot outside the factory for 2, 3, 4 days, 5 days, a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks before it actually goes to the customer's backyard, that's your money tied up. That's waiting to be invoiced, waiting to be collected from the customer. And any kind of bottleneck in that process, whether it's administrative, whether we're not scheduling effectively, or whether it's waiting for a last coat of paint or a window that was broken, or a window that was special ordered and isn't here. Whatever the bottlenecks are, that from the day that shed starts production until you're able to invoice it at delivery, Getting that absolutely as short as possible is optimal for excellent production. And I'm finding a lot of companies just aren't paying attention to that. They're not optimizing that timeline. And this does require really good management of production from the time you invest your first dollar in the lumber for that material to the invoice date where you collect for a delivered product. Keeping that really short is how you drive profitability and drive margins inside your company. And I would incidentally say, make very happy customers. So we need to work at managing that. So really the key for leadership focus here in the production side is discipline around inventory, both raw material and finished goods, clear communication systems from order to install, and then planning and managing capacity so that we don't have too much capacity. We don't have too little capacity to keep our promises. Those really are the big challenges around production. And I see companies facing these every day. And to get crystal clear on where your problems lie and working to solve those. And I would just note that probably the key takeaway here in my mind is that operational strength, to be really strong in production, is only an advantage, not if it just builds a great product at a great price, but if in fact it's connected to demand, flow, and cash flow. That's operational excellence. Okay, then we come to finance and admin. And this function is usually far less exciting for most of us who like to sell stuff and make stuff. But finance and admin, if there's one golden nugget around finance and admin, is that this is the department that just tells the truth about your business. So this is where you can't dodge the reality of how you're doing. So what does healthy finance and admin look like? Well, timely, accurate financial statements. And this doesn't mean in time for filing your taxes. It means monthly closes, or at very least, every quarter you close the financials. Know if you made money, how much money you made. If you lost money, how much money you lost that quarter. Closes that actually happen. And I think it involves inventory, properly tracked and accounted for, COGS accuracy, cost of goods sold accuracy, and then key visibility or clear visibility into all the key metrics around finance. What's your gross profit margin? Is it going up? Is it going down? What's your cash position? What's cash flow look like? Are you set up with adequate cash for the flow of your business? And then profitability, and ideally by product or by product line or profit channel center. So that's healthy. Now, the challenges that I see in the finance are delayed or inconsistent financial reporting. I'm frequently seeing people who show up with their financials and they say, well, last month we made bukus of money. I said, what's your gross profit margin? Oh, it was, 65%. I said, well, you can't build sheds at a 65% gross profit margin. Something's probably wrong in your inventory counts. Because the next month, their gross profit margin is 25%. Well, you can't run a business on 25% gross profit margin. Okay, your inventory is probably adjusting. And I'm seeing frequently inside, especially smaller manufacturers that don't have really rock solid ERP systems, software packages to track inventory and costing their products. These inventory numbers just are wild, completely undependable, which means your P&L, your profit and loss, is not telling you the truth about how your business is actually performing. And this inaccurate cost of goods due to inventory issues or due to when you receive something versus pay for something, that sort of stuff just brings a kind of fuzziness into your financial performance that does not allow you to run a great business based on numbers. You're left with running your business based on a gut feel. And as a business leader, as an entrepreneur, I can tell you that gut feel changes sometimes 20 times a day. Some days you're feeling yeehaw by 9 o'clock in the morning. This is fabulous running the company. We're doing great stuff, making great money. By 11 o'clock, you're down in the dumps and we're all going to die and we're losing money and this is terrible. And I don't know how we're going to get out of this. And it gyrates every day up and down. And the only way to kind of moderate that is to be sure we have good measurables. And that includes in our finances. So leaders in the finance and admin area of business really have to be focused on discipline around those monthly or quarterly closes. Be sure that our inventory adjustments, inventory accuracy is top notch, both finished goods side, raw materials inventory, and that our balance sheets actually reflect what is true about our business. And then we want simplicity and clarity in reporting. We want to look at those quarterly financials or monthly financials, ideally. And we want to see not only what our revenue was, what our gross profit margins, our labor costs, our material costs as a ratio of revenue, and our key overheads, those sorts of things. See whether they're consistent or whether we had spikes or slumps. We also want to know, is our inventory growing or decreasing? Where's our cash going? Is cash stockpiling? Why is it stockpiling? Because of profits or because inventories are declining? We want to know where those things are so we have clear transparency into our business operationally and can make good financial operational decisions. And I would just note the takeaway here, I think, for finance and admin is if your numbers aren't right, every decision you make is harder than it needs to be. And it may actually be misguided because you're making them based on faulty data. Okay, and then to get close to wrapping this up, I just want to note that, see if I can get my little pen to convert back to black. All of these major functions in the shed business are tied together by somebody who is responsible to see to it that these three major functions stay aligned. Okay, if sales and marketing is lagging and production has more capacity, that we get sales and marketing working. If sales and marketing are working, production is working, that we have good financial data. And sometimes we call this person, the GM, the general manager, or we might call him the CEO, or in EOS language, we call it the integrator, because their role is to integrate these major functions together into a harmonious, healthy, single business. This integrator leads the whole business. They ensure that the three functions operate as one system. They drive clarity, accountability, and alignment. And they resolve issues that fall between the departments. So if we're continually having trouble between sales and production, and let me just tell you, this is true in almost every business. These are the two departments that are always fighting. Okay, production says, wait, what's that? And sales says, well, that's what we want. That's what we sold. Figure it out. And production is always trying to trim down, standardize, normalize so they can produce more effectively. Sales is always trying to expand the product line or bring new stuff on board. Somebody's got to make those decisions, and that's the integrator. And so he resolves those issues. So what this looks like, he's responsible. The person sitting in this integrator seat, he or she is responsible for the sales and marketing leadership, for the production leadership, for the finance leadership, to regulate, to manage, to be sure they're staffed well in each of those places. They're responsible to lead regular team meetings so that that team of people stays on the same page with shared scorecards, shared priorities. And that person is responsible, the integrator is responsible to seeing to it that we have a clear way of running the business, how we do things, what our cadence is, what our structure is, how we communicate to keep everybody connected. Some of the common challenges here are every business has all these functions, but I see sizable companies, $5, even $10 million in revenue, where we have one person leading each of these major functions. One person just wearing too many hats. And this starts pulling back the business. It becomes the lid on the company's growth. I see functional leaders lacking leadership capability. So you might have a great integrator, but your head of production is out over his skis. More is demanded of him than he can actually deliver. So the integrator is always stepping in to help him. Okay, you have production bottlenecks at that point, or your sales is just not strong enough. And I'm seeing this. The leader of the sales and marketing just isn't up to the job. Okay, and the integrator has to fix that, or the integrator has to step in and help him grow, get him coaching. So wherever your bottleneck lies, it often becomes a leadership issue. The leader is the lid. And the question is, can the integrator, the GM, the general manager, CEO, solve that problem adequately. So, and I noted this in a Shed Business Journal article recently called the 7 Shifts Framework from tradesperson to business leader. I'm just finding a lot of leaders that started these companies, the business grows beyond their ability, beyond their leadership skills. And so they're still carrying everything. And the growth trajectory really is we have leaders who have a bunch of employees. And then we have leaders who manage a few managers who have employees. And one of the hardest shifts is going to a shift where you have a leader as a CEO, as an integrator, who has a true leader that's up to the job in the marketing and sales, a true leader that's up to the job in production, a true leader that's up to the job in finance and admin. And you have a leadership team who really does have the capacity for the size of your business. That's the variable. It takes a different person to drive a $100 million revenue sales marketing team than it does a $5 million one. But they have to be able to deliver the results that the shared group needs to be successful. So one person wearing too many hats, too many leaders that lack the capability to really drive the results that we need, or misalignment between departments. And the integrator is not strong enough, pardon me, or has not brought enough clarity to the table to get those departments aligned. And then often when you hire other leaders, there's culture drift. And the founder becomes nervous about the kind of culture that's developing. And it's usually because he has not been able to clearly articulate that culture and then train and equip the leaders and managers to sustain that same culture in their hiring activities. So those are just the challenges that I see scattered, through shed companies. And I'm going to note these, particularly around the integrator, are not unique to shed industry. They're pretty common in businesses that go through growth. So what does a integrator, CEO, GM really need to focus on? One of his number one priorities is people, being sure that the people in the organization fit the culture, that they have their roles clearly defined, and that they have the capacity to actually do those jobs successfully around shared expectations. The integrator is responsible to see to it that the structure is clear, that everybody knows what their responsibilities, roles are, and hold them accountable for that at a shared metric. And then also that they're healthy. Trust is high, communication is clear, open and honest, and there's accountability across each team. And so I would just conclude this by saying, key takeaway here from the integrator seat, the GM, CEO seat, is you don't scale a business by working harder. You scale it by building a team that can run the business together. And that's one of the lids that I see, especially in the, small to mid-sized shed companies, bumping against the lid. And one leader is overwhelmed because the rest of the leaders are not quite up to their tasks. And they've not put a plan in place to grow a leadership team that can truly bring in the sales volume that they want and need for their production facility to operate efficiently, so that the finance and admin shows truth that we're happy about. And that's the integrator or CEO or GM's responsibility. So just to kind of recap, bring it all together. Strong sales and marketing. And I'm going to summarize that here. Strong sales and marketing really drives demand. And I want to note that word is drive. Drives demand. This is not about passively sitting around waiting for more leads. It's taking ownership of how we create leads, knowing which ones work and convert, and then dialing those activities up to the level of shared expectation for what our revenue is going to be coming in the front door. That takes leadership. It's not sitting around waiting for it to happen. It's not sitting around blaming the economy if it's in a funk. It's doing the things that it takes to actually drive the demand to get the number of leads we need to convert those to adequate closes to fill our production lines. Okay, that's leadership. That's what a healthy sales and marketing team looks like. And then operations to deliver consistently. And this consistent is the word, because if you can't predict consistency, you're going to have unhappy customers on the backside. And finally, what's really clear in the finance and admin side, success is defined as simply telling the truth. And if your financials are not telling the truth, you're making decisions based on a lack of true information, clear information. And you'll be shocked when that information corrects and you actually figure it out. So the strong integrator then is the person who's responsible to keep all of that aligned. And just to reinforce it, a healthy shed business is not just great at building sheds, but it's great at running a business, great at running a great company. So I encourage you just to reflect, which function is your biggest constraint right now? What's holding your business back? Where are you the weakest in these functions? Integrator, sales and marketing, production, finance and admin. And what's your next step? Who are you going to talk with about this? Are you going to sit down with your team and have this conversation? Our sales just aren't adequate. And so our costs are out of control in our production side. We're working half time. What are we going to do? How are we going to solve the problem? Get clear on your process and get clear on your structure. So that's my gig for today. And again, welcome your input, questions right here, right now. So Rebecca, why don't we open it up for any questions, see if someone has something or comments for that matter.
All right. Well, we're still waiting for some people to drop some questions in the box there. So please go ahead and send in anything that you have. I do have one just to start off while we're waiting on some others. So the first thing that kind of came to my mind was you had talked about how important having a good process is. And I know that for a lot of businesses, especially like starting out, that may not have had a good solid process, there might be processes and things scattered everywhere, and in different places. Have you found like a really, really good way to just like if things are scattered, where do you start with like documenting that and keeping everything all in the same place for distribution?
Yeah, so there are a number of software platforms out there that specialize in providing structured. I don't really specifically recommend or not recommend any of those. But I tell people start with whatever platform you're currently using to store documents. And for many people, that's Dropbox, Google Drive, OneDrive, and create a folder and just call it the name of your company way of doing business. Identify what those core processes are. And in EOS, we take a very simplified approach. We just want to document the 20% of a process that accounts for 80% of the results. And we think that with having good people, right people in right seats, that they can humanize the 80% that accounts for the 20% of the results. So a very simple kind of first page calls this is our company processes, and then a highlighted index that's hyperlinked to your core processes. You can go there, click there, and here's our marketing process. And at a high level, bullet points, kind of we do this, then this, then this, then this, and then a few bullet points under each one. So keep it really simple. And that's the big blueprint we want to have laid out. In fact, it's my favorite metaphor when I'm teaching this is back to the old road atlases. And Rebecca, you're probably too young to remember the Rand McNally road atlases. You grew up in GPS world. But I love that because you can open it up on the first page. You'd have the whole United States or all of Western Europe. And all the major roads were listed, routes between major destinations. Okay. And if you don't have that blueprint in place, there's no point in having little street maps in your processes. So get that one, and then you break it down into the core processes. Okay. And each of those core processes, a marketing process, a sales process, that's kind of a regional map that now has state routes on it. And usually I say for most companies, when you have right people, that's all you'll ever need, other than a few compliance issues that require a very detailed SOP with screenshots and that sort of thing. Then you just hyperlink that inside your marketing or your accounting or HR process somewhere. So if we don't keep it simple right out of the gate, it's probably never going to happen. So we've got to really start by simplifying everything, high level view, getting that documented, and then just training people and tracking, are we actually doing it this way? And as soon as we're no longer doing it this way, somebody may have figured out a better way. Let's update our process and retrain everybody that touches it. So
Yeah,
really, really simple first. You can get more detailed over the years.
that makes a lot of sense. Thank you. We don't have a question here, but we've got a comment from Calvin Shirk. He says, as a former employee of Steve's, this has been the usual great info and teaching that Steve provides. And he says, thank you.
Oh, thank you, Calvin. Valued his work at our company for quite a number of years back back a good few years ago. Let's just put it that way.
That's
Okay, and
pretty awesome.
if there are no more, we'll leave it at that. Thank you so much for joining us. Those of you that did, and just a reminder, these become recorded. They go on YouTube. They can be found in a Facebook group. Invite you to join the Facebook group. Actually, we always post there when the webinars come up. YouTube, the doc by Steve Byler. And you can also sign up to receive newsletters at Shed Advisor. And we've got a loyal crowd that also follows us on a dial-up platform where you can listen to this as a podcast by simply dialing the number 228-591-9706. So thank you all for joining us again. Look forward to seeing you all next month on the one around HR, human resources, all things people.